is accelerating, and the timing for this type of webinar could not be better. In a recent radar report from GigaOm, CloudFabrix was scored as a leading innovator and outperformer in this space. We have with us today Shailesh Manjrekar, CloudFabrix Chief Marketing Officer, and Ron Williams, GigaOm Principal Analyst, to review that report and CloudFabrix position in it. Shailesh is a seasoned industry veteran and an active member of the Forbes Technology Council. He brings an established background in this space, and as CMO for CloudFabrix, he is responsible for shepherding its AI solution set, adoption, and acceptance. Ron has over 3 decades of practitioner experience providing innovative solutions like AIOps for high-growth organizations. As principal analyst at GigaOm, he provides research, such as the radar report, delivering actionable insights and technical guidance for their clients. Should you have questions for our presenters during the webinar, please put those in the chat. There will be SMEs responding in the background real time, I am told, and we will have our presenters respond to a selection of those at the end of the main presentation, time permitting. We are recording this webinar for on-demand playback. And I will take this opportunity to proactively answer what is typically the most frequently asked question on webinars like this. Yes, the recording and the slides will be shared with everyone. And so with that behind us, Shailesh, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you, Daryl. Thanks for that introduction. Hey, folks, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for joining us today. It's a very exciting topic. We have over about 600 registrations. So clearly, this is an area which is of interest to us. And it gives me immense pleasure to welcome my co-host here, Ron Williams, who has had an illustrious career and most recently as an practitioner and a principal analyst at GigaOm. So with that, we'll dive into the webinar. So today's topic clearly is AIOps and observability market trends and insights. And we'll talk about how this market is evolving. And you have a fantastic panel here between Ron, Daryl, and myself who would give you insights into the evolution of this market and the GigaOm Radar report which just came out. And then I'll talk about why CloudFabrix is really worthy of becoming why it became an outperformer in the GigaOm Radar report. So let me get to the next slide. So today's agenda is primarily going to be around AIOps market definition. And these are the topics which Ron will be providing insights on, and both Daryl will talk about the main market trends as they are evolving in the AIOps market. We'll also talk about the key criteria which GigaOm used for this GigaOm Radar report for 2023. We'll talk about the radar report itself and the evolution, and then I'll go into a little more detail around introducing CloudFabrix, our platform, and our recently launched generative AI assistant. So with that, Ron, I would take this opportunity to ask you and provide some insights into how this market is evolving and how you see this really being a tool for organizational awareness. Okay, so Ron, with that, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Shailesh. Yes, been working in the area of AIOps since its definition several years ago, and have done some big implementations and testing. And one of the things that AIOps has turned out to be is a force multiplier, in the sense that we are very concerned on the IT side, on the technical side, about operational awareness. That means, are all of our IT ecosystems working correctly, doing the things that they're expected? However, the business is sitting over there with their awareness issues, but quite often they're not connected. AIOps has been one of the few tools that we have that allows us to start bringing both of those worlds together in a single place, so that you can do correlation, the event gathering, root cause analysis, prediction, so many other things, because there is a good AIOps tool can consume data from any source. And that source can be marketing information. It can be social information. It can be financials. It can be anything from HR to product development, anything that you want to feed that you can correlate and put together with other technical information so that the teams, and both in IT operations management, support teams, and business support teams, can come together and you have this an organizational awareness. The first time I got an understanding of what organizational awareness was is when I had a CIO come to me. This is before the time of AIOps, and said, "Are we okay?" And I looked at her as if she had just beamed in from Mars, because I had no idea what the question meant. But "are we okay" is a question that more and more enterprises are trying to understand. So we talked, I asked her questions, and I finally understood what she meant. And I was able to say, "We're having a problem with some of the software over in legal, but there's no business impact. HR just put out a new product that is not having any technical impact at all. And all of the servers and other things that I know about right now are okay." She was headed for a C-level meeting. I didn't understand what "are we okay" meant, but we've never been, as an IT or even as an enterprise, been able to ask the question, "Are we okay?" The direction that AIOps is heading in allows us to start looking at that, and I call it awareness. And operational, organizational, business awareness are things that we don't look at from the technical side very often. We want to make sure that our network and cloud security, databases, storage, we want to make sure all that stuff's okay. And we feed that into our observability tools, and they give us answers, but they don't give us awareness of what the entire business is doing. And that's where AIOps comes in as a force multiplier to allow us to do that. So this slide is that slide that says, hey, here's how we bring those things together. The next slide is the one that I always get into.
Yeah. So by the way, I mean, that what you just said, Ron, is so powerful, right? I mean, it really kind of articulates the value of AIOps very eloquently, right? I mean, it's not just, yet another tool in your queue, right? It really is something which tells you, how your overall organization is doing, going across both your operational awareness and business awareness, right? So in fact, if you can dive a little more deeper into, the frequently asked question is, hey, how does monitoring, observability, and AIOps, relate to each other? So I'll let you kind of provide some insights around that.
Yeah, this slide is one of my favorite because we all in IT have worked so hard to make sure we're monitoring every single thing that we have. The cloud has made that far more complicated in the term observability came about, but it's still a form of monitoring to understand. Yes, we've gotten better tools that can give us some ability to do prediction. We've gotten better tools that can, in real time, ingest literally tens of thousands of events and alerts that are in our environments per second. I can say from a personal experience in terms of monitoring, at one major airline I worked with, over almost 23% of all of the traffic on the entire network was from monitoring. And you say, well, whoa, that's all. I said, and the question was, who actually can ingest that? Well, the answer is nobody. There's no human being that can do it, and that's just not going to happen. But the critical things we could look at from a monitoring perspective, and we could say, oh, that server is broke, so we go look at it. Or there's a problem, but we don't know why. Observability started asking, taking that from, is this system okay, to how are they behaving? And how things behave means how are they interacting with each other? How are people interacting with them? And we get, that was when APM, which was and still is a major part of that. And as we moved to the clouds, it became even more complicated to understand, because part of our application might be running in cloud, part of it might be on premise, part of it might be in some secure enclave within our business. Another part of it might actually be talking to an ancient mainframe that still does one thing that nothing else has ever fixed. And we don't have the ability to look at that in any kind of sane way. And observability asks helped us answer, how are they behaving? Are they performing the way we think they're supposed to? And when they do have problems, can we do something about it? Quite often, if we had good run books, or if we had good ability to define how a system is supposed to run, we can remediate those things. But one of the more important things is we can have shorter, less impactful incidents. So when something goes wrong, at least we can get to it. Awareness is moving up that scale to not is a system okay, or is an application okay, but is the company okay? That question I was asked by a CIO 10 or 15 years ago and stood stunned with no answer to. But we can also say, are all parts of the company working together? This includes things from the business and from marketing, and from, if you make widgets, if we're making 10,000 widgets an hour and that changes to 9,000 widgets an hour, why? That sounds like a small question, but it's actually a huge question for a company that makes widgets. But you can't see that, because if you go look on the IT side, everything's fine. But there may be a reason why, because somebody changed something that IT doesn't know about, but the company needs to know about. And when things break, we know not just when, but why. And because when we start adding AIOps, predictive capabilities, we can actually prevent incidents from taking place. And actually, with good seasonality data, we can predict when we need to increase our capabilities. Black Friday is the standard one that everyone looks at. But if you have data from last September through October, then you can use that data to predict what you might need this year and prevent whatever the problems were from last year from taking place, because you can see them and you know which systems, not just which servers, but which systems are impacted. So the "are you okay" part becomes far more powerful, because you're not just talking about IT. IT, unless you're in the business of IT, IT is not the business of the company. And because it's not the business of the company, awareness of how the business, the company, the entire enterprise is working becomes even more critical. And incidents do not always happen in IT. Incidents happen in marketing. Incidents happen in sales. Incidents happen in a number of places that have nothing to do with IT, yet when you feed them in with other IT data, you get an awareness of what the company is doing from both the technical and business side that is not possible without anything else.
Yeah, very well said. Sorry, go ahead, Ron.
No, I was just going to bring up two types of AIOps, but we'll go into that in the next piece. Did you have some comments on this one?
No, I think so very well said, Ron, right? So I think you articulated it extremely well. Yeah, I would actually like you to talk about those multiple, kind of AIOps, because it's a word which is very loosely used by folks, right? So yeah, if you can add a little more clarity to that would be helpful.
Okay. Is that in the next slide, or is it this? We're good. AIOps and observability. People have been trying to say lately that those two things are becoming the same, and they're actually kind of not. Observability tends to be within a particular domain. You may be an APM company, you may be a Kubernetes company. So your observability product is observing something's fairly specific. AIOps and those tools have added AIOps capabilities, the ability to bring in data from OpenTelemetry, which is the standard for moving telemetry data around. But they're not as concentrated on bringing in those sales, marketing, HR, legal, finance data into the system, because they're observing a technology. AIOps and because some of those tools came from, say, APM or monitoring, they are quite often domain specific. And domain specific, they work in a certain environment very, very well. The domain agnostic tools within AIOps are those tools which don't rely on a particular technology. And there are two things that happen because of that. One, if you have a domain agnostic tool, you're literally laying it on top of all of the tools that you have. If you have a domain specific AIOps tool, you may have to replace or duplicate data that you already have. And tool displacement is a major piece of the consideration when you're looking at AIOps. Displacing all of the tools you have because you want to go with somebody who has something really neat is great, but the political capital to displace tools is very, very, very high. Many places have organic tooling, organic things that have grown up for years, and they're very reluctant to get rid of those tools because they work. Domain agnostic tools also have political capital, but it's a little bit different. Here you have a domain agnostic tool and you pull in data feeds from different areas, whether it's observability, whether it's monitoring, whether it's database, whether it's sales, you're pulling in that information. The political capital you have to exert in that situation is just to get the VP or director to say, yes, I'll give you that data feed. They don't have to do anything else themselves. Whereas if you have a domain specific tool, you may have to replace tools, and those tools can be in multiple departments, multiple areas, especially if IT is a bit decentralized, or if you're doing really good agile work, which I hope everybody's doing. So you've got a lot of people involved. And so when you want to change their tooling, tremendous political capital. Domain agnostic versus domain specific, there's always a place for either one. It depends on the organization, and there's not a flat, this is the only way, but it should be a consideration when anyone is looking at an AIOps tool to make sure that you understand whether or not your organization is best suited to a domain agnostic tool or a domain specific tool, and for all the reasons that I just brought up.
Yeah, very well said, Ron. Thanks for that clarification. And that part is so important to understand domain specific versus domain agnostic. And as you rightly pointed out, each has its place. And when you're choosing a vendor, you got to be able to make those considerations. So the next question I have for you is there are a lot of transformative technologies, which are almost ripe to kind of catapult AIOps. Okay, so I'll let you talk a little bit. I mean, Gen AI has literally, is set to transform
Yes.
AI and the AIOps market. So I'll let you talk about some of this inflection points.
Oh, this is really good, because the emerging technologies part of AIOps is actually kind of cool, because part of it is that AIOps itself is an emerging technology. You're bringing together things that we've not really done well in the past. If any of you are old enough and remember that the goal in the early 2000s was a single pane of glass. Well, those single panes of glass never did work because they never told you anything other than, well, that's red and that's green. What does that mean? And then you dig down and then, oh, well, who's the SME who knows what that means? And the AIOps tools have added intelligence to that. That's the AI parts and the machine learning to know what some of those things mean, so we can get to a certain place and understand what's going on. And it's not a single pane of glass. It's the ability to understand the environment. Gen AI has the ability to literally change the way in which we look at that massive amount of data that is generated every single day in any enterprise. You could consider all that data to be the learning model, and how that works within a given company can be quite different. Generally, when we talk about generative AI, we're normally talking about words and text and things of that sort. But when you talk about generative AI within the AIOps world, you're talking about data about your environment that doesn't necessarily have a lot of human content, but it has a lot of relative content. And to train your AI on that information requires some special things. Among the things that one of those is the ability to explain what the heck the AI is doing. I expect that the AIOps world next year, for the next year's radar, will have generative AI coming from every single vendor, and it will be totally different for every single vendor because nobody truly knows what that means yet. We have some ideas. When you look at ChatGPT or Claude or Bard, you get some ideas of what it can do. But what is that going to be within the AIOps world is still being defined. But because there are so many different ways in which you can do it, the ability to explain the models that are going to be used for AI becomes very important. If part of your models is just technical data, that's one thing. But when you start including business data, your models are going to be different, and you need to understand them and be able to explain what's happening, because even though your CIO is going to ask you, hey, what's going on? Is everything all right? And you say yes, and then they look at you like, well, why is X happening? You don't know. And generative AI may be able to, the first time we can say, why are we having a slowdown in general on the number of converted orders when you go to a website? Sounds like a nice question. I can send 3 or 4 technicians and they can work on that, and developers can work on that. And probably in a couple of days, I'll get a good answer. Generative AI gives us the ability to ask that question and get an answer now, but we have to feed it data. AutoML is the part where the ML itself is learning from the data that it has and automatically configuring its parameters. This goes right along with explainable, because yes, you'd love to be able to explain it, but you also need to not have to go in there and tweak parameters every 3 days. That's a bad thing too. So that's the AutoML part is a key part to generative AI within the AIOps or this technical space. And then we get to my actually most favorite of all of these when you talk about generative AI is AI bias management. I had someone say, why are you talking about AI bias management? We're just talking about data from networks and observability. There's no bias in that. I'm going, you've just defined the bias by the statement that you just made. If your data is dominated, for example, by, say, APM data, then you're going to be biased towards API data. If it is dominated by certain types of situations, your generative AI is going to be biased in that direction. So being able to understand how the data impact the results becomes important. So that that's all about the explainable AI. It's all about AutoAML. But if you can't understand the inherent biases you have within your data, that becomes an issue. Let's take the agnostic part. When we talk about agnostic AIOps, here you're getting specific data feeds from different parts of the business. Let's say you've brought this up and the only data feed you're getting is from networking. Well, you ask your Gen AI question, it's going to be biased towards networking. But then, now we're going to add in some APM data. Well, the learning module has just changed. Where is it biased now? And as you add more and more feeds, it's going to be biased in some direction or another. And you need to be able to see that and make sure that it's responding properly. If you're dealing with a domain specific, the domain itself, let's say the company is an former APM company, the domain itself will be what it's biased towards, and getting it to take out those biases for data coming from other areas will be a key factor in making sure that Gen AI works properly. And as I said, those data feeds, those data pipelines can come from anywhere, whether it's IoT devices, whether it's databases, whatever it may be coming from. And the ability to manage those pipelines, those workflows, if you like, easily, it becomes a key factor in the ability for a Gen AI to really do its job well. So those are my thoughts on that. I'm going to save the last one for a minute. Shailesh, do you have any other thoughts on where we're going with Gen AI? Because next year it's going to be interesting. It'll take a few years before it gets good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's still in its early and it's in infancy, right? But Gen AI is really, I mean, the way we see it right now is it's scheduled to democratize data and AI, and it's going to really catapult the use of AIOps. But no, I think you touched upon all the right points.
Yeah. May I interject here for a second?
Yeah.
Something that struck me, Ron, when you were talking, generative AI gives you the promise of being able to answer that initial question you started with, and that is, are we okay? And so you no longer have to think about it, you just type it in. So that I just wanted to make that point. Are we okay is now within our grasp of understanding that in milliseconds.
Yes, we've never had the capability. And as I say, next year, the AIOps tools will all be starting out with their first generation generative AI. And generative AI, remember, I forgot to mention this, it combines predictive analysis real-time analysis, and large learning large learning to be able to do what it does. That, of course, by definition, introduces some of the things that I've talked about.
And now back to our regularly scheduled program. Sorry for the interruption.
Not a problem. The area that I've actually left to last is cybersecurity. It is unfortunate, but cybersecurity is probably more important in some ways than anything else we're doing with AIOps. The AIOps tools can ingest cybersecurity data. However, the challenge has been that cybersecurity has been in the SecOps vertical area, and responding to it has been in the IT area. We've got these two operations areas. So when AIOps can ingest that same cybersecurity data, apply it to all of the information that it's got going, the ability to see that a ransomware attack might be happening, or that there's data anomalies, or that someone is signing on in an unusual way, or there is a DOS attack happening. AIOps, because it can get data from a number of different places, bringing in the cybersecurity area is one of the next levels where AIOps is going to be able to have an impact. It's already had an impact on all forms of IT operations, but cybersecurity and security in general has been in a separate silo. And I'm hoping, and this is part of my hopes, because I've been fighting this battle for years, is that silo starts to work better with the tools that the enterprise uses to know what's going on. So you can ask the question, not only are we okay, is we can say, is there anything going on that might look like a ransom attack? Sounds like a simple question, but if you ask your SREs that, they're going to be back, they're going to be gone for a little while because they don't know. Well, yeah. Sure, you may have systems that can detect that, but those systems are not part of the normal IT operations. So cybersecurity is a major trend I expect to see within the AIOps world, and to some degree the observability world, because if I could say, if you use the general term for observability, the SecOps people are doing observability in security. And we need all of those observability tools to come together somewhere so that those data can be correlated, analyzed, do the predictions, look at real-time data. These are challenges for the AIOps world. And part of this is that AIOps has not been universally accepted everywhere yet. Lots of companies looking at it, lots of things happening with it. And it was only 2017, 16 or so, when I put in my first AIOps solution. And so that sounds like a long time ago, but when you're talking about a technology that has an impact across the entire environment, that's a few minutes ago. So it's new, and we're still working on it. Companies like CloudFabrix have done some interesting things, and we will be talking about those things.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so the next slide, Ron, so this is more a little tactical, right? So just,
Sure.
Take this opportunity to explain, what were the different dimensions you looked at when you were evaluating these vendors?
When I looked at the vendors, there's one thing that's actually not on here, and that's called table stakes. Those few things that everybody must have, obviously things like dashboards and being able to ingest data. Open telemetry is now considered a table stake. If you can't ingest open telemetry data, it's going to be hard for you to really work in the AIOps world because data comes from everywhere. But the things I looked at is obviously market segment. Large enterprises are the biggest consumers of AIOps. There are some small, medium-sized businesses who see that their IT and business environment is sufficiently complicated that they need someone to help. And that's what AIOps can do, is that force multiplier to take the data you have and make it more powerful. MSPs using AIOps, there are some. That is not a major area, but I do look to see if they're doing it, because these are the three major areas. When it comes to deployment, there are three things that we have to consider. There are some tools which are completely SaaS. They are in various regions around the world, and they provide the proper background or compliance if you are in South America or Europe or whatever. On-premise has value in that if you have data, if you're a bank, those who basically deal in PI, private data, on a regular basis, some portions of it being on-premise can be very, very useful and very powerful. But at the same time, because we have so many hybrid and multi-cloud environments now, the deployment model in a perfect world can deploy in all three of those and be seamless and not have a problem. Some do it better than others, but it's one of the criteria that I looked at. One of the things I looked at. When it came to criteria, this is where things got interesting for me. Data collection and analysis. I said that open telemetry was one of the table stakes, but when I say data collection and analysis, I literally mean, can you ingest data in any form from any place within the environment and analyze that data? Sounds like a small statement. It's tremendously large. If you've ever looked at the data coming from, say, Cisco networking, that's a massive amount of data and it comes at you very quickly. But at the same time, you have to be able to analyze it. So that's the first thing I was looking at. Then if you have good workflows, good definitions, you might be able to auto-remediate certain things. For example, in a Kubernetes cluster, hey, one of the nodes went down, F. Never mind, I'm just restarting that one because I know what it is. So you automatically take care of that. Customizable dashboards will not be a key criteria next year. It will be a table stake. Reason? If you can't do that, I don't know why you're in this business in the first place, because every piece, every screen you look at probably needs some customizations depending on who is doing the looking. If you're the CIO, you want to look at it one way. If you're an SRE, you want to look at it another way. If you're a DevOps person, you want to look at it another way. But the data are underneath are still the same. And the AIOps tool have to be able to do that. And they can these days. Predictive capabilities is where there is a lot of variability within the AIOps market right now. There are some systems which are purely run real time. They provide some tremendous capabilities of knowing what's going on right now. There are some others that can predict a bit into the future, say 30 minutes to an hour. And there are others which can take, if you save enough data, they can do seasonality, do a year, 2 years, just depending on how much data you save. Obviously, there's a cost when you save data. So some of this is not just whether or not they can do predictive capabilities, but what would be the cost if you wanted to do predictive capabilities over a long period of time. So I look at those things because once you start having all that data you collected, and if you keep it, you can recognize what things that your company, your business is doing that are new. Integration with BI tools is part of the whole thing of AIOps and awareness. If you can bring in those BI tools, whatever they may be, whether they're from Salesforce or from Microsoft or SAP, when you can bring in that business integration, now you have the ability to once again get a better response to the "Are we okay?" question. Multi-cloud support will be a table stake next year. The expectation is that you can do that. Very few large enterprises use only one cloud. There may be some, but I haven't run across very many. If I go to a bank, they're using all of them. If I go to an airline, they're using all of them. If I go to manufacturing, they're using minimum of 2 to 4. So multi-cloud support will be a table stake. But I wanted to understand this year where people were, and we're doing well. Service level management is slightly different than what many people think about. It is not creating a service. It's not a service level. It is managing all of the service levels you have. You have a different service level for a network switch than you do for a Linux server. You need to be able to manage all those service levels and then bring them together as different types of dashboards or different types of data that be fed into your predictions or other things that you might need. You can say, hey, my service level for this is 70%, but the predictions say that I'm going to be at 20% in 2 days. Is the service level correct, or is the data correct? You may need to be changing that service level. One of the storage example is the one, setting a storage service level for a particular system at 95% might be fine, but for another storage system, you might want to manage that service level at 80%. So managing those different service levels becomes an important factor as you try to make sure you understand all of the data and how it comes from different parts of the company. Task and workflow management. Many times, IT sends that over to the ITSM system, but that's not going to work anymore. We have data coming in from various places, and that data may need to go through a workflow before it's collected and analyzed. And so tasks, and this has to do with tasks which may be coming from this system or tasks that are given to the system. You have to be able to handle those and the management of those workflows as to what people need to do. And it goes also back to the ability to remediate. So your workflows may be part of remediation. Those workflows may be part of data analysis or even predictive or any other pieces. But being able to manage those workflows and see and make sure data is going where you want. In the CloudFabrix term, those are managing pipelines. In other terms, it's a data management issue. Others, it is a task management. But that whole workflow area becomes key to what you do with when you get all of this stuff, not the ability to just do it. And the last one has been in the key criteria is value metrics. Value metrics is tricky. These are value of the system metrics, not just value. So it's not just MTTR or those things. If you have an AIOps tool, you can see how that AIOps tool is doing, what it's doing, and as we move towards more AI, how it's doing things. So those value metrics are those things that not necessarily used by the whole enterprise all the time, but you need to be able to have the ability to go back and say, hey, is this AIOps tool doing what we need it to be doing? Are the results what we expect? And that's not related directly to any of the others. It's not an SLA, but are we getting the results we want? So that value of the platform metrics becomes a key criteria. The others are fairly straightforward, cost and value. Hey, do you get a good value for this? This is one of the largest line items that you may have in your budget because it covers the whole entire enterprise. Anything that big is a big budget item. So how is that cost and value looked at? So I don't look at the actual numbers or TOCs because that's not really fair because everybody values the thing differently. Rather, I talk about licensing and when can you get value from these? For domain agnostic, that may be different than for domain specific. A domain agnostic tool, you can put the tool in and you get value every time you get a new data feed. For domain, and that can be very quick. I've done it in 3 months. If you're doing a domain specific tool, it depends on how much tool replacement you can do and how many other things that may be related to that in terms of political capital. So cost and value is up there, and it includes things like professional services. Are they mandatory to get this up, or can you, if you've got some smart guys, can you take care of this yourself? So that's part of it. Ease of use is what it says it is. Is this easy to use? Some companies have done a very good job over the years. I'll even pick on CloudFabrix here. 3 years ago, I gave them a pretty hard time about their ease of use and their UI. They've improved. Period. Let's leave it at that. We'll talk about that later. Scalability. Remember, we talked about those deployment models. For SaaS models, scalability may be easy, may not be, depending on how that model goes and what it might cost you in terms of value and how easy it is. On-premise, it can be even more difficult if you didn't scale things with enough memory and enough GPUs to be able to handle what you're doing. So that becomes a challenge as to how you're going to scale it. And if it's a hybrid model where you're using private, public, and on-premise stuff, how you scale becomes a challenge. And that's important as we add more and more data coming from more and more sources, whether it's legal, finance, or whatever, to the IT data. And obviously, you have to manage this thing on a day-to-day, and you have to maintain it on a day-to-day. And so I always look at those things to see how easy it is to do updates. Will this thing, are you having to schedule 6 hours of downtime for something that is now key to the business just to update it? These things are very, very, very important. And so I want to look at that. And the emerging tech are the things we talked about earlier. So not going to cover those again. We'll cover those again.
Yeah. So we'll skip that in the interest of time. So I'll go to the next slide, Ron. That was, by the way, very good, very well laid out, right? You pretty much went through all the criteria. So let's
talk about through all of it. Yeah. Here we're going to talk about this in a broad-based way. First off, we've got four quadrants: feature in 4 areas: feature, maturity, platform, and innovation. Feature is where the primary part of the solution is feature-based. It's got some specific features, and that's where all of the domain agnostic are going to be on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side will be those platforms or domain-specific tools. Below the line are those who are doing some form of innovation that's unique, or in a way that the rest of the more above the line or platform or players who are pretty much doing, most of them are doing the same thing. Some of them may be part of a tremendous platform like BMC or IBM, Splunk, Broadcom, or there may be those who are, like the domain agnostics, the big pandas, the PagerDuties, et cetera. And everybody's pointed towards the center, and that's because everybody wants to be in the leader, and the leaders are in the middle. And we have 3 ways we look at these. There's the fast movers, those who are moving forward, and outperformer. Everybody's trying to get better, so I assume we kind of start with the baseline that everyone is attempting to make their product better. Fast movers are those who are moving more quickly, and outperformers. And first off, these are not relative to each other, they're relative to the company itself. For example, why is CloudFabrix an outperformer? They're an outperformer because they're doing better than would be expected since the last year for CloudFabrix, not necessarily compared to someone else. So CloudFabrix has managed to leapfrog a few areas in the last few years, and that's why they're here, and why they have an outperformer. Others are fast movers. Some of them are larger companies with a lot of resources, so they can move things quickly. And that might be why, compared to them, they're doing it. And others are just continuing to move forward, which everybody is doing. So please remember, when you're looking at this one, you're looking at how the direction, the speed is relative to yourself. Have you managed to, in a year, kind of leapfrog one of your big roadmap areas and get further ahead than expected? And that's what that means. So, Shailesh, I know you have got your questions you want to ask me about this so that we can describe it better. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, no, I think you articulated it very well. I mean, there's so much knowledge and expertise here on the panel. We'll pretty much easily spend a couple hours just talking about it. So I'm going to move quickly. Yeah, I think if you have covered most of it, we'll go to the next slide. Okay.
Sure.
And then if you can outline, hey, what were some of the areas where you thought, CloudFabrix really outperformed? Yeah.
CloudFabrix has been working on the robotic data automation area for a number of years, and the introduction of the data fabric is one of the things that allowed them to leapfrog where they even planned to be. And so that was they did that better than most. That ability to, and Shailesh will talk to you about how CloudFabrix does that data collection, but it was one of the areas that I saw that CloudFabrix was doing very well. Predictive analysis, CloudFabrix can handle the seasonality. Yes, that means you have to save more data, and yes, there may be some additional costs, but you can look at a year's worth of data and do a year's worth of predictions. Obviously, the closer the predictions are, more accurate, but the ability to do that is not common for a year, at least within the AIOps world right now. And so that was something where you were better than average. And because of the way that data pipelines work, which are inherently a task and workflow management system, that made CloudFabrix a little bit better off than most in those areas. So these 3 areas are things that CloudFabrix did very well. And of course, those had positive impacts on the evaluation metrics as well. But these are 3 areas where CloudFabrix outperformed themselves.
Great.
So
great. Thanks, Ron. very, very insightful. So in the remaining 15 minutes or so, we'll try and cover, hey, give you a little introduction to, who is CloudFabrix, right? How are we a company, and so on and so forth. And folks, if there are questions, please ask them on the chat box here. So primarily, I'll cover the areas which Ron talked about, the robotic data automation fabric platform, which is really our key differentiator, and the Gen AI assistant, which we recently added. And we'll try and go a little faster. So we've been part of the analyst community for a while. We've been part of the GigaOm Radar report for almost 3 years now as a leader. So 2021, 2022, and this year, clearly we were categorized as Outperformer. Clearly, we are on the right path. We are doing the right things. So clearly, all the kudos to our leadership team for their vision, for their execution, and so on. Okay, we've been also working with some of the other analysts here, right? All the leading analysts here. We started actually the go-to-market for the product started in about 2018 or so. This is actually our fourth startup. The previous 3 startups have been coincidentally, they've been bought over by Cisco. It wasn't really, spin in or spin off. Cloudflare being the larger one, which has now morphed into UCS director and a business unit within Cisco. So very enterprise, a very engineering focused team, good at developing products, enterprise products, which have evolved into business units, creating, multi-billion-dollar revenue and targeting, large customers. About 90 people headquartered here in the Bay Area, in the Silicon Valley, in the East Bay. We also have a geographic presence across the globe. So our unique value proposition. So clearly, looks like this year we are pretty much firing in all the cylinders. So major customer wins across the board. And the good part about it is we are in multiple verticals. We are in healthcare, we are in fintech, we are in telco, we are to some extent in federal space, that's through partners. More importantly, a lot of strategic partnerships, right? I mean, this is how we envisage ourselves to be able to proliferate the reach of the technology. So a very close partnership with Cisco, primarily because of our pedigree, but we were one of the 3 partners for their FSO platform, which they just launched. It is a very innovative platform. Think of it as like a snowflake for observability. We also work very closely with IBM Consulting, with clearly other channel partners and SIs like Wipro and DXC and so on. And the third pillar, which is growing now by leaps and bounds, is really about our ability to build a community around it. So clearly, this is a low-code environment. We have 1,000+ bots. And we are building this community where we can have customers come or even aspirants come and build up questions, ask questions, build up the technology by themselves and so on. Okay, so this is self-learning, self-awareness, a self-doable kind of a community where you can ask questions. Okay. So this is a platform itself. And again, the robotic data automation fabric is really what sets us apart. We quickly realized early in the cycle with the AIOps that, hey, AI for that matter is only so much effective as much as the data at hand. Right. And there are data challenges to be solved because, as you know, almost 80% of the time gets spent on, on data quality issues. So the data fabric, it really kind of can connect to disparate data sources across geographies. And it brings in all of that data, it contextualizes it, it transforms it, it enriches it, and then you are able to leverage AI/ML pipeline. And all of this is done in a streaming platform, in a streaming manner, with all the automation you can imagine. It's a microservices-based platform, so you can host it in the cloud, you can completely host it on premises, or it can be hybrid. And then you see these 3 pillars, right? So everything in the platform is composable, and this is what our customers like the most, right? So the bot-based architecture is a clear differentiator where you can create new bots, you can create new pipelines. So obviously we have out-of-the-box services like AIOps, FinOps, telco, and so on, but you can create a completely customized new service and clearly the dashboard. So this is what we call composable analytics, and this primarily targeted towards platform engineering team. AIOps is where, it's our bread and butter. And this is where, we already talked about it a lot, but primarily targeted around BizOps, DevOps kind of an persona. And then now we've started building solutions on top of this, right? Leveraging the underlying platform. So we have a telco service assurance solution. We have a SAP solution. We've been working on the Cisco FSO platform. We have a log intelligence solution, which is primarily targeted towards CISOs, okay, FinOps, and now GenAI. Okay, so I'm going to go a little faster in the interest of time. Okay, but if there are questions, feel free to ask on the chat box. So this is how we see this market evolving. And this is clearly a vendor's perspective, right? We talked about some of these things. So there are AIOps players which are very domain specific. Okay, they come from APM or ITOM background or log analytics background. And then as you see, there are adjacent markets which are evolving, which is the observability pipelines. And this is where the ability to take the data, the shape the data, to send it from any source to any sink comes into picture. And there are clearly players there, and there is advancement happening there as well. And then the third pillar of this market is really the data fabric, which is more kind of focused around data integration, data quality. And there have been some hyperscalers which have announced, data fabric products, like AWS announced, App Fabric, whereas Microsoft recently announced Microsoft Fabric. Google announced Dataplex. But they are more around the BI aspects of the industry or the application stack. Where CloudFabrix fits in is we are able to bring the best of all of these three worlds, right? So we have the capability to do observability pipelines, okay, the ability to shape the data, to send it from any source to any sink. Similarly, we have the data fabric, which brings in all of this data, which is geographically dispersed, eliminates all the data silos, and then is able to massage that data and literally liberate that data, and then run AI ML on top of that. So that's where, all the real power comes in. So we are expanding beyond the core, just AIOps capabilities. So this has been our recent telco win. So again, telco is a very complex deployment, as you can imagine. There is campus, there is wired, there is wireless, there is mobility, there is 5G, right? And all of these different domains are ingesting data, which is sometimes SNMP traps, there is syslog, there is open telemetry, there is topology across OSPF, BGF, and so on. And the RDF platform was uniquely able to solve this challenge, being able to ingest all of this disparate data. Goes back to what Ron was saying earlier, right? AIOps tool has to have this ability to bring in any kind of data. And then we are able to do fault management and performance management. So this is a very impressive win. Just recently, we got this, we just got a PO last week. It's a tier 1 telco, right? By far, you can imagine. And then because of the observability pipelines, we also have an ability to send a feed to a platform of your choice, which is open telemetry based, right? It could be an open telemetry backend like Cisco FSO platform. It could be somebody else, okay? Next slide talks about, real quick, I'll kind of touch upon the bot-based architecture, which really enables us to shrink the POC cycles extremely small, okay? And the main reason is because, we are based on microservices. We are like a FAS or a Lambda, what you call a function as a service, which is event-driven. But unlike FAS, you don't have to write the code. The bot is already pre-populated with a piece of code, right? So, and they are field extensible, they are field customizable. So what you're doing is you're building that logic using the pipelines. You're just putting this bot together to build a pipeline. And this is where we are seeing, that we are able to really kind of shrink those cycles, do rapid code development. So this is a low code development platform, if you will, right? Next is Macaw is our generative AI assistant, right? So one of the major differentiators what we have, so there are other observability vendors who are also implementing Gen AI. Our advantage is we already had a low-code platform, okay? And now we are able to add Gen AI on top of it. And the low-code platform is very crucial, and everything we talked about RDF, because what happens is Gen AI, just leveraging an open source OpenAI implementation where the large language models are only trained on the internet is not going to fetch you anything. You need large language models to be trained on your knowledge corpus to be able to build that context. And that's the part we are able to do very effectively with the robotic data automation fabric platform and the low-code environment. So we're able to bring all of this enriched data with the context, train our local LLM, right? So we have our own large language model, and then use those as prompts to enrich that further from Azure OpenAI service, right? So we are literally going from a low code to a no code environment, okay? And these are all conversational queries where you'll be able to ask the platform, hey, create my composable dashboard. This is today in production, right? I mean, certainly we'll be able to showcase a demo for you. There are demos on our website, so go take a look for it. Okay, create a pipeline, right? How analyze my data sets, explain my network outage impact, right? So these are simple conversational queries even a citizen developer or a citizen admin can ask. Okay, and that's where Gen AI is going to democratize this whole domain. Okay. So again, as I said, we have a local LLM, which we train on our local knowledge corpus. And this is where the differentiation happens because, again, data is still the king when it comes to Gen AI, right? Otherwise, it's just garbage in, garbage out, right? So that still remains the same, okay? And you can feed in anything here, metadata, KB articles, pipelines, and it will spit out dashboard, pipelines, service blueprints, and so on, okay? So there were some, obviously, when we are doing this, the accuracy and predictability of the LLM is really determined by that local knowledge corpus, right? We ensure governance and privacy because we use user policies. We also use enterprise-grade Azure OpenAI service. So a customer will actually run all of this in his version or his instance of the OpenAI service. So to ensure that his data doesn't leave his premises and so on, okay? We have been able to overcome the limitations of tokenization with OpenAI, which is today restricts it to only 4K or 8K tokens. So we have kind of worked around with the ability to do compressed docs and so on and so forth, okay, and provide a very efficient prompt engineering mechanism. So this is a Cisco FSO platform. This just was announced at Cisco Live in June. We are one of the most prominent partners where we has an app on top of this platform. So think of this as a data warehouse, right? Which is an entity-based model, right? So you create those entities and then you are able to bring in that data. So for the GA release, we are focused on providing vSphere observability to this platform. So now you can take an hybrid application, which has Kubernetes running VM on an EXS server, and be able to provide observability and AIOps on the Cisco platform. We also have a partnership, as I said, with IBM Consulting. We just announced this partnership 2 months ago, right? So this is senior partner from IBM. So they clearly leverage their deep expertise in the domain, but use us for actual service delivery, okay? Open telemetry, as Ron alluded to. So we just don't support open telemetry. We have the ability to take open telemetry, non-open telemetry data sources, okay, and then convert them into open telemetry using our bots, right? So this is a very huge kind of capability. But more importantly, it's not just telemetry; it's the enrichment which we can bring in along with the conversion, and then we can ingest this in any open telemetry backend. It can be ours, it can be somebody else's, right? So clearly you'll get these slides as well. Okay. Explainability. So clearly, we use a number of ways we do the training, but more importantly, this is about, as Ron was alluding to earlier, hey, how do you build trust in your AI pipelines and your AI models? Because customers still are apprehensive. So what we have is very unique. So we have the ability to actually synthesize faults in your sandbox before you're deploying those pipelines, right? So you can synthesize, say, a web server fault, a database fault, a Kafka issue, and see how your pipelines are behaving, what your dashboards are showing, what your notification mechanism is doing, and get comfortable before you actually deploy that in production. Okay, so that's very unique, okay, for us to be able to build this, right? And then finally, this is my last slide, right? So we talked about it. It's been an honor and privilege to be part of the GigaOm Radar and being able to work with really industry analysts like Ron and Daryl. And with that, my last call to action is we have a SaaS platform. So this is all free for 2 weeks. Just log in, play around with the platform. We also have a free community sign up. You can join our Slack community and ask questions. Okay. So with that, I'm going to pause here. I know we kind of really ran over time, but a lot of insights, Ron. I really want to appreciate all the insights you provided. And Daryl, thank you.
Yes.
I'll pause here for any last.
So thank you both. It's been informative, and I wanted to ensure that you got thanks as well. I'd like to summarize, as it doesn't look like we have time for questions. So here's the summary. Being scored as an outperformer, as CloudFabrix is a function of ability to execute and market acceptance. And probably market acceptance in this case is more important. And the fact that you are in the innovation quadrant and a leader in that innovation quadrant, it's not surprising to me that you might have good market acceptance. So that's to be congratulated for CloudFabrix as well. You're on a good trajectory and in a good space, and you're innovating to meet the needs of that market and serve your customers. So that would be my summary. So with that, thank you all for taking the time to stay on and view this webinar from these two astute gentlemen, and we appreciate everyone's efforts and sacrifice of their times. Kind regards to all, and have yourselves a great day.
Thank you, Daryl, and thank you again, Ron. And folks, if you have questions and chat board, I don't know if Srini was able to answer any questions, but if not, we'll get back to you, through email. We'll send you the answers. Okay. And again, thanks for joining us. Again, overwhelming participation in this webinar. We had about 600 registrations. So thank you so much, and hopefully you walked away with a lot of insights.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone.